What if the very place you called home was quietly killing you? What if the golden halls, the polished floors, the rooms meant for comfort and rest, were hiding a danger so insidious that it could steal your life before you even realized it? This is the story of Prince William, a man the world has seen as strong, stoic, unshakable. But behind the public facade, a quiet storm had been brewing, one that would shake the monarchy to its core. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. It began, seemingly, like any other day. Kensington Palace was quiet in the early morning, sunlight spilling through the ornate windows, highlighting centuries of history, power, and privilege. But behind those walls, in rooms that had been meticulously renovated over the years, something deadly was growing. Something that no royal doctor, no palace staff, and perhaps no architect had intended. The very renovations meant to modernize, to protect, and to impress had inadvertently created a silent killer, toxic mold and asbestos, infiltrating every corner of the bedrooms, hallways, and private chambers where Prince William had slept for years. For decades, these walls had absorbed stories, royal secrets, whispers of scandals, the echoes of laughter and tears. But they had also absorbed spores, invisible to the naked eye, creeping into the air and into the lungs of the unsuspecting. And William, unaware of the danger, had been living among them every day. He had been breathing in particles that, over time, would become lethal. The diagnosis that came to him one otherwise ordinary morning was devastating: stage 4 cancer. The very air he had trusted, the very palace he called home, had betrayed him in the cruelest way imaginable. And the timing of this revelation could not have been more tragic. William is a father of George, Charlotte, and Louis. Children who still believe their father to be invincible. Children who see him as a protector, a guide, a hero. Yet now, their world, too, is about to be shaken. According to reports, William has begun drafting letters to his children, letters to be opened on their birthdays long after he is gone. Imagine the emotional weight of such an act. A father confronting his own mortality, trying to preserve his voice, his love, his guidance, for the moments he may never witness. It is both heartbreaking and haunting, an intimate glimpse into the private agony of someone the world has always viewed as unshakable. But there's more. A secret environmental report, hidden from the public eye, and perhaps even from the most senior palace officials, has revealed the terrifying truth behind the renovations. The very people tasked with ensuring the safety of the palace knew of toxic mold and asbestos exposure. Yet the warnings went unheeded. William had unknowingly spent years in rooms where the walls themselves were a threat. Every night, as he lay down to rest, every quiet morning as he woke for duty or for his family, he was inhaling the very particles that would eventually imperil his life. The story becomes even darker when we consider the timeline. The renovations occurred over a span of years, carefully documented and praised publicly for their grandeur and attention to detail. Behind the scenes, however, contractors, architects, and palace staff were aware of the toxic risks. Asbestos is not subtle. Mold is not easily ignored when it is as pervasive as this report suggests. Yet, for reasons that may involve negligence, bureaucracy, or perhaps a deliberate effort to preserve appearances, these dangers were minimized, dismissed, or concealed. William's exposure was prolonged, cumulative, and tragically undetectable in the early stages. By the time symptoms appeared, the cancer had already advanced beyond treatment thresholds. And the symptoms themselves were misleading. Initially, they were subtle. Fatigue that seemed to stem from work, mild aches dismissed as normal stress, brief coughing spells written off as a cold or seasonal allergy. Who would suspect that the palace, a symbol of strength, history, and stability, harbored such a quiet, destructive force? By the time the diagnosis was confirmed, the disease had progressed aggressively, leaving William and his family facing an unimaginable reality. Stage 4 cancer is not a whisper, it is a roar. And for a man who has always been in the public eye, always expected to maintain composure, the emotional toll is beyond measure. But there is an even more chilling layer to this story. These letters to his children are not mere tokens of love. They contain lessons, warnings, and insights into the secret dangers William has discovered within the palace walls. They are carefully written, meticulously planned, and suffused with an urgency that only someone facing the unimaginable can convey. What will George, Charlotte, and Louis feel when they open these letters? Will they understand the gravity of their father's love and foresight? Or will the pain of loss overwhelm even the carefully crafted words? This is a father planning for the unthinkable, a monarch preparing to leave guidance for the heirs he adores, and it is as intimate as it is harrowing. Even more, the environmental report raises questions that no one in the public eye has yet been prepared to answer. How long has the toxic mold been present? Were there other palace rooms affected beyond those William used? How many other royals, staff, or visitors might have unknowingly been exposed? The implications ripple far beyond one individual. They touch upon legacy, responsibility, and the hidden vulnerabilities of institutions that have been considered untouchable for centuries. The very walls of Kensington Palace, steeped in history and grandeur, may now be seen as instruments of tragedy rather than protection. And this brings us to the heart of the drama, the juxtaposition between appearance and reality. The palace is a symbol of wealth, stability, and power. To the public, it gleams with opulence, adorned with priceless art and furniture, representing the continuity of the monarchy. Yet, beneath this veneer, danger had been quietly festering. It is a stark reminder that sometimes the most perilous threats are the ones we cannot see. How could a structure built to preserve history and protect royalty become the very source of a life-threatening illness? The answer lies in oversight, secrecy, and the unanticipated consequences of modernizing an ancient building. Imagine the nightly routine William unknowingly endured. A room that seemed pristine, safe, and serene, slowly releasing microscopic spores into the air. Days blending into nights, the pattern invisible to everyone around him. Even medical professionals could not detect the severity until it had already manifested as a full-blown, aggressive cancer. It is a chilling example of how fate, environment, and human error can intersect in ways that defy expectation. And while William maintains the composure expected of a prince, privately, he must grapple with fear, anger, grief, and the crushing responsibility of what he leaves behind. And yet, amid the tragedy, there is an undeniable humanity to the story. The letters for his children, the moments of quiet reflection, the private struggle to remain strong while facing a terminal diagnosis. All of these details paint a portrait of a man whose courage is both extraordinary and profoundly relatable. It is the story of a father, a husband, and a prince confronting mortality in a way that the public rarely sees. How does one reconcile duty, love, and personal survival when the odds are stacked so brutally against you? The story is far from over. The report, the letters, the palace renovations, they are all threads in a larger, more complex narrative. Who knew what and when? Could this tragedy have been prevented if warnings had been heeded? And most urgently, what will happen next as William navigates both his health battle and the intricate web of palace politics? The answers are not simple, and they are not fully known. But the unfolding drama promises revelations that will shock, enrage, and deeply move anyone who cares about the monarchy, legacy, and the private lives of those in positions of historic power. As we begin to peel back the layers of this story, keep one question at the forefront. How do you prepare to say goodbye when the world is watching, your children are waiting, and the walls around you have been silently conspiring against your very survival? The answer lies in the letters, the report, the hidden truths of the palace, and the courage of a man facing the unthinkable. And just when you think you have a grasp on the situation, the next revelation will upend everything you thought you knew. Because in this story, nothing is as it seems, and every detail, from the renovations to the mold, to the private moments with his children, holds a key to understanding the full magnitude of the tragedy. It was a morning like any other, or at least that's what William thought. The sun rose over Kensington Palace, spilling golden light across the ornate halls and high ceilings, highlighting centuries of history, power, and tradition. Birds sang in the gardens outside, and for a fleeting moment, the world seemed perfectly ordinary. But William knew something was off. A fatigue had settled into his bones, subtle at first, easy to dismiss. A slight cough lingered, but he shrugged it off as a seasonal nuisance. After all, he was a man of duty, constantly moving, constantly under scrutiny. Pain, discomfort, and worry were luxuries he could rarely afford. Yet, that morning, a sense of unease had taken root, a whisper in his mind that something wasn't right. The day began with routine checks, a visit to the royal physician for what was supposed to be a standard health review. William had faced countless checkups over the years, and none had ever yielded anything more than minor issues, stress, mild fatigue, nothing that disrupted his life. But this day was different. The physician's face told a story before any words were spoken, a brief tightening around the eyes, a pause in the measured tone that usually carried authority and reassurance. William felt it immediately. Something grave, something irreversible. When the words finally came, they struck like a hammer. Stage 4 cancer. The diagnosis was unequivocal. The room seemed to shrink around him, air thickening with disbelief and fear. Stage 4. The most advanced stage. The point at which treatment becomes not just a battle against the disease, but a battle against time itself. William, the prince the world had always perceived as invincible, was suddenly mortal in the starkest terms. The realization was surreal. The very body he had trusted, the very life he had built, was now under siege. He sat in silence for a moment, letting the words settle, trying to process the enormity of the news. Questions flooded his mind. How long had it been progressing? How much time did he have? Was it treatable, or was it already too late? But even as fear gripped him, William's thoughts turned immediately to his children, George, Charlotte, and Louis. His heart ached not for himself, but for them. How could he explain to them that their father might not be there to watch them grow, to guide them, to protect them? How could he face the prospect of leaving them without a parent, without a shield in a world that could be cruel and unforgiving? The physician, recognizing the storm of emotion, tried to offer reassurance. "We will do everything we can," he said, voice steady but gentle. "Treatment options exist, and while this is aggressive, we will fight it." But William could see the truth in the doctor's eyes. Stage 4 cancer is notoriously relentless. Treatment may prolong life, may alleviate suffering, may offer hope, but it cannot reverse the reality. It cannot undo the damage already done. And William knew this. In that moment, he understood the stakes. This was not a fight that could be fought alone. It required strategy, support, and courage, but it also demanded acceptance. What made this diagnosis even more harrowing was the realization of how it came to be. The palace renovations, intended to modernize and preserve, had inadvertently exposed him to toxic mold and asbestos. Rooms he had slept in for years, rooms that were meant to provide comfort and sanctuary, had become sources of danger. Invisible spores, undetectable to the eye, had infiltrated his lungs, silently laying the groundwork for the cancer that now threatened his life. It was a cruel irony. The very spaces that symbolized security and legacy had become instruments of destruction. How could such a thing happen? Who was responsible? And why had warnings gone unheeded? As William grappled with these thoughts, he felt the weight of isolation. No one could fully understand the burden of this knowledge. The intersection of privilege, duty, and imminent mortality. He was a prince, yes, but he was also a man confronting the fragility of life in the most intimate, personal way possible. The palace, with all its grandeur and history, now felt like a prison. Every corner, every ornate detail, was a reminder that appearances can be deceiving. The beauty of the walls could not mask the danger within them. William's private moments became a labyrinth of fear and reflection. He thought about Kate, his partner, his confidant, the mother of his children. How could he protect her from the shock, the grief, the knowledge that her partner's days were suddenly numbered? How could he maintain composure, carry out duties, and still remain a pillar of strength for his family when the foundations of his own health were crumbling? The emotional toll was immense, a blend of anxiety, sorrow, and an almost instinctual need to shield others from the reality of the situation. In the quiet hours, when the palace staff had gone about their routines and the gardens were empty, William wrestled with what he would leave behind. Not just titles, not just a legacy of royal duty, but love, guidance, and wisdom for the children who depended on him. And that is when the idea of the letters emerged. Letters for George, Charlotte, and Louis to be opened on birthdays, milestones, moments when he might no longer be there. These letters were not merely words. They were fragments of his soul, a way to communicate across time, to ensure his presence lingered even in absence. The thought was both comforting and devastating. Writing them was an act of courage, of foresight, and of unbearable heartbreak. Doctors, aware of the diagnosis, urged action. Tests, scans, and consultations began in rapid succession. Specialists weighed in, assessing treatment options, survival odds, and quality of life. William, ever disciplined, absorbed the information, balancing hope with realism. But even with medical expertise at his side, he understood that the cancer's progression was not merely a biological event. It was a narrative shaped by time, exposure, and chance. And the exposure had been preventable. The environmental report, hidden in a pile of bureaucratic documents, revealed the scope of the danger: toxic mold, asbestos, and decades of oversight failure. The palace that should have been a fortress of safety had failed him.